another tech video. Today I'm going to be talking to you about cable changing. Specifically today I'm just going to be doing a brake cable. Process is just about the same, materials differ a little bit, but the process between a brake cable and a transmission cable, a derailleur cable, it's going to be the same thing. So basically what's going to differ is going to be our cable size, thickness, and the cable housing is going to be a little bit different. But other than that, the process of snipping the cable, trimming to the right size, and then threading it through is essentially the same thing. Today I'm going for my rear brake cable on this bike here. What we're looking at in terms of the brake cable is my cable is going to be attached inside of my brake lever right here. And it's going to run through, be attached to the frame right to my rear brake right here. So basically this is the type of thing we want to change. Essentially, I won't say that there's really a set time limit where you want to change it. That being said, it's the type of thing where sometimes you'll see that you might feel a little bit of extra resistance in the cable, or a lot of the time what we're going to see is we'll pull the brake lever, let it go, and we'll see our caliper is going to take a little bit of extra time. Or in terms of our derailleurs, a lot of the time what we're going to see is we're going to change gears, and going from small to big gears is going to be easy. It'll do it perfectly. And then when you go from the big gear to the smaller gear in terms of teeth size or teeth number, basically it's going to come to the right spot with a little bit of a delay. So you'll change gears to go from your larger plateau to your smaller one, and what's going to happen is basically it'll kind of start skipping a little bit and eventually arrive at the right spot, but there's a delay. So it's not going to just in question of adjusting the cable tension or anything like that. It's the level of resistance between your cable and your cable housing that's causing that slow reaction. Alright, so the other thing you want to look out for is, let's say your cable housing, if it's damaged, if it's frayed or anything like that, it's always good to change it. Or anytime you've got a rusty cable, that's going to be a good indicator that's time to give that a change. So I'll go over the materials that we need real quick. We'll start off, we need our cable, new cable, new housing, and I'll say real quick that this is the type of job where, generally speaking, I always change both of these together. You can just change the cable and leave the housing if you want, but usually it's the best practice is to change them both at the same time. That way you know you're starting new on both ends and you're not going to have any extra resistance. After the housing and the cable, next thing we need is some trifluoro lubricant. So it's basically very simple. It's just a not very viscous lube, not a chain oil. It's the type of thing that I like to use mainly for lubricating the inside of my cable housing. Also, it's a good thing that you can use for anytime you've got like little pivot points. You can give a couple of drops of this in there and it usually does a pretty good job of loosening things up. We're going to need some electrical tape in this case, since I've got a road style handlebar. Anytime you've got a flat bar, you're not going to need this part or the scissors. But for the road bar, since I need my cable housing to follow the curvature of my handlebar, it's going to be held on there with tape, so I need a little bit of electric tape, scissors to cut that said electric tape. Next I'm going to need I'll go with these. Next I'm going to need cable cutters. This is one thing where I really like the Park Tool ones above just about every other ones that I've tried. One, when you're cutting the cable housing or the cable itself, they tend to make a really clean cut. And two, the crimping tool here does a pretty nice finish. The crimping tool is what we're going to be using to tighten down the cable caps, the end caps. I like to have a pair of side cutters as well. It's basically just to clean up the cable housing, and you'll kind of be able to see why when I cut this afterwards. It always gets a little bit squished, so I tend to use these to clean up the cut a little bit. And then some sort of a pick. I've got this little, I don't know, it almost looks like a dentist pick that I've found somewhere. But any type of pick set, basically this is what we're going to just use to kind of clean up the opening from the inside. So if the plastic membrane on the inside of the cable housing is folded shut, you can take this pick, kind of edge it open, and then clean out the inside. And then we're going to need an X-Acto blade to trim a little bit of the rubber casing off our housing. And then we're going to need our ferrules and our cable end caps. So I'll give you a little bit of a close-up of these. The ferrules are the larger ones right here. They're just going to go right onto the cable housing. And then you have the cable end caps right here, which we're just going to crimp down onto the ends of the cable once we've trimmed it to the right size. Basically, we want to remove our old cable and whatnot. In this case, since I've got this tape on here, that's the first thing I'm going to take off. So I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and, being extra careful not to scratch the handlebar, just cut clean across. And that'll do for that. So I'll pull this tape off. And you want to keep a note of where your cable is passing through. Because chances are, I mean, as long as it's in the right place to begin with, that's probably going to be your best route for putting it back in when you put the new stuff back in. Most of the time for road bars, where we're going to want to have it is it's going to want to be just on the inside curb of our handlebar. So coming out of the, I want to say kick-up, that's not it. Coming out of our shifter lever combo and just following the curb like that. Then it will come out of our grip tape and follow its path afterwards. So I've got my tape off. Now I can kind of pull this out. Maybe. Normally, I'd just go and kind of cut the cable right at the caliper here and pull it through. And I'll give you guys a little trick. If you want to change your cable housing without changing your cable housing, what you want to do is basically pull it out of your brake lever or your shifter, cut the stopper off, and then you can pull it through like that. And the reason why that is a good way to do it if you want to maintain your housing is because chances are at the other end of our cable is going to be a little bit more corroded or rusted. So you can kind of see this one here, it's a little bit crushed right there, whereas at the other end of the cable it's fairly clean. So pulling that through is going to do less damage to the inside of my cable housing than the part that has been crushed a little bit, essentially. So I'll just roll this up to the side. Alright. And then we want to keep our length of cable housing. You want to take a note as well before you take it off if the length is right. In my case, I know this one was actually a little bit short. So what was happening is when I turned my handlebar, it would pull on the cable and actually activate the brake just by turning the handlebar, which is not something we really want to do. So I know I've got to add a few inches onto this one. Probably about 3 inches is what I'm going to add onto it just to be safe. And we should be good with that. You want to keep an eye out for where that cable passes. So this one, it was coming out here, and then I've got a little, it's fairly simple on this bike, and then I've got a little holder for my housing right here, another one here, and then I've got a second length right here. Most of the time when you buy cable housing, it's probably going to be sold by the meter if we're in Canada. If you're using the metric system, or it'll be sold by the foot if you're using the imperial system. Basically, I generally tend to go with like buying a little bit more than I need, and risk still have a little bit extra. More is, generally speaking, a little bit better than not having enough, right? So I'll put these aside. This one I know I'll be able to take and just cut the same length. This one, like I said, I'm going to need to add a little bit onto this. So now I'm going to take my cable and I'm going to put it through right away. Install it on my brake lever here. This can be a little bit tricky sometimes with this style of brake lever. have a good idea where that hole is, and then I've got that for pretty quickly. Sometimes you just gotta play with it a little bit, or shine a light in there to see where the little hole is, where it's gonna pass through the rest of the lever. Not really a better trick for that, unfortunately. So I've got that through. Next, what I want to do is I want to cut my cable housing to size. So I'm just going to unfurl this. And I'll start with my small one. So I'll start with my small one since I know that it's the right size. And I'm just going to take my cable cutters here. And just cut it. Just like that. I'll put that aside for now. This I don't need anymore. It's in the garbage. And next I'm going to take the other section of housing. And what I like to do is basically I'll line up my new housing with the old housing. So I'll take the two ends, I'll line them up together so that they're side by side, and then just kind of straighten both of them out at once. And so if I had the right length to begin with, I would just cut here. Like I said, I need to add a few inches, so I'm probably going to go to about there. And that'll be my second layer. And once again, done with this guy. So I'll just roll it up real quick and toss it. And so I've got this amount of cable housing left over, but it'll be good for another job down the line. So now we've got our cable housing cut to length. The next step is basically just going to be to clean up where we cut a little bit. So first thing, that's where I'm going to take my side cutters, and basically anywhere where the metal braid of the housing, anywhere where it's kind of sticking up a little bit or folded over, I'm just going to trim that off. I've got a little one right here. It's not too bad. That's even better. Do the same thing on the other side. So I've got a little bit folded over right there. That's good. Now I'm going to take my pick and I'm just going to open up the plastic casing on the inside of the housing. There we go. And there we go. That one's good. I'm going to do the same thing on my other leg. I'll start with my side cutters. I'll trim it. Alright. A little bit more there. That's good. And I'll take my pick, open that up. If ever you're not able to open up the plastic casing on one side, if you're really unlucky, you might not have a hard time on both sides. But if you're not able to open it up on one side, which I might actually be having that problem right here. I got it. What you can do is basically just pass your cable through the side that is open. It'll poke through. You're going to want to take that cable out and then clean it up a little bit though, because chances are there's going to be a little extra resistance. Alright, that's good. So next, what we want to do is we want to take our X-Acto blade and we just want to trim a tiny bit of the housing off. Just not even half a centimeter. Usually what I like to do. Opinions might vary on that a little bit. But I found just a tiny bit like that. So you're going to have this as your end result. And you'll be good to go. Do the same thing on my other end. So this one's good. And I'll do the same thing on both ends of my other length. And again, I mean, barely, not even really half a centimeter, I find to be about perfect. And so basically I'm just kind of pressing the housing onto the blade of my box or my X-Acto knife, and I'm just kind of rotating. So I'm pressing down with my thumb and then I'm just turning it. So that way I'm not going to slip and cut myself. Definitely a place where you want to be extra careful since you're dealing with a fairly sharp knife blade. That took a little bit more than I wanted with that one, that's alright. Alright, so next what I want to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my Tri-Flow and I'm just going to put a tiny little bit in one end of my cable housing. Just a little squeeze, you don't need a whole lot for this. Just like that. And then on those ends I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my ferrules on. Alright. So the reason I put my ferrules on that end is because that's the end I'm going to pass my cable through first. That way it's going to spread the Tri-Flow evenly through the rest of the cable housing. Alright, so I'm going to start with my first length of cable, my longer one. And I'm going to start threading my cable through. Basically what I like to do is once it starts coming out the other end, I like to take my other ferrule and I like to put it on straight away. That way I do not forget. And then we want to pull our cable all the way through until our housing is seated in our brake lever. So for now I'm not going to tape it just yet. I'm just going to kind of put it in its right path. And pop that in its place. I'll just try and hook my cable in here. Alright, so now I'll take my other length of cable and I'll do basically the same thing. Then my cable through on the end that has the ferrule, then take my other, put it on. Almost lost another one of them. That's seated properly, and then I'll put my cable right through my barrel adjuster on my brake and right through the retaining bolts. I have to loosen that off a little bit more. There we go. And there we go. So I've got it seated right. Next what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe my hands down. And I'm going to take my housing down here before I go any further. Get that out of the way. So basically, like I said, this is the type of thing for this part. You want to follow the inside curve on your handlebar right here. So I'll just hold it in place. Good idea to get your tape ready beforehand. I thought I had, but I guess it's folded down again. The name of the game is find the end on the electrical tape. I'm not a huge fan of folding it over because then it's a bit of tape which I don't really want to use. But that's alright. So I'll put my tape on like that, and then I'm just going to hold the housing into place. And I'm going to do a couple nice tight loops around the handlebar and the cable housing. Once I'm satisfied, you don't need too much taper here because I mean you're going to put grip tape over it as well. So it's pretty, there's not a huge amount of force on it either. So a couple turns around, you should be alright. I like to do one at the corner here, and I like to do one a little bit further along. So I'm going to get my tape back. And again, a couple nice tight rotations. And we'll cut that. And about it on that end. So that's ready for the grip tape next. Then, next thing we're going to want to do, since I don't have my rear wheel ready for this bike just yet, and I don't have the brake pads yet, I'm going to show you how to adjust the cable real quickly and to do the last little bit on my front brake, which I already have just changed the cable on, so it's ready to go. So first what we want to do is we want to set the cable tension. Basically that's going to differ a little bit depending on the type of system you're using, from different types of brakes to derailleurs. It's going to be pretty much the same thing all around, but different types of brakes, a little bit different techniques that you can use. I'm going to have a few videos coming up. I'm just grabbing that. So I'm going to take my Allen key here, and I'm just going to hold that down, get it good and tight, and I'm just going to make sure that cable is indeed in the right spot, and that should be pretty good. So next what I want to do is I'm going to take my cable cutters again, and you can use side cutters if you really want to, but generally speaking cable cutters, it's not going to squish the cable as you're cutting it, so you're going to end up with a cleaner cut and not a cable that's not going to start fraying on you. So I like to leave no more than basically 2 inches of excess cable, basically just enough to hold on to if we need to adjust the cable tension. Not so much that it's going to get caught in the spokes or anything like that, and basically not so much that it's, so that's going to be aesthetically pleasing is what it comes down to at the end of the day. And as long as we have enough to grab on, as long as it's not going in the spokes, it's not huge importance, but I find about 2 inches aesthetically pleasing. Then I'm going to take one of my cable ends, and this is where the Park Tool cutter is very fun, because I can just kind of hold it in this part right here, and then I can just hold that, put it on the end of the cable, and then just squish it down in one nice motion. Just like so. And I'll give you a little close-up of what that looks like once we're all said and done. And there you go. Nice clean crimp. 2 inches. It's going to look good. One thing I didn't have to deal with right there, but one thing you do want to watch out for is basically as you're setting your cable tension, one thing that can happen a lot of times is your cable can pop out of where it's seated in the lever itself. Let's see if I can get it to pop out a little bit more than that. So it can pop out like that, so then when you set your cable tension, it's not necessarily fully taut. Then when you go on brake, that'll make it pop into its right spot, and then you're going to have a loose cable again. So you just want to make sure it's actually seated in the right spot in your lever before you tighten it down. Again, not the end of the world. If you forget that step, you can always just loosen the retaining bolt, pop it into place, and tighten it again. So basically, to sum it up, it's a pretty easy job overall. You definitely want to have the right tools for it. You definitely want to have the right materials, and it is a job that is very important because when you have the minimal amount of resistance between our cable and our cable housing, that's when our brakes or our transmissions are going to be working at their best. The second there's too much resistance, especially with our derailleurs, that's when we're going to start to see our derailleurs going from our large plateaus to our smaller ones. It's going to take a little bit more. There's going to be a delay, so it's not going to shift perfectly. A delay in shifting is never fun. And with brakes, what we'll see a lot of the time is the caliper itself won't open properly once we release the brake lever. Again, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thank you.